Everyone, Raj Sahu here, realtor in Austin, Texas. I wanted to come at you with a market update and answer a couple questions that I do get often. The market update will show some numbers of what's happening in the Austin real estate market. But the two questions I do get asked the most is, are we in a bubble? And how far do I need to go above list price? I'm going to answer both of those here, and I'll also have a recommendation, and then we'll get into some numbers. So starting off with, are we in a bubble? My simple answer to that is no. In my opinion, there are so many positive catalysts in Austin, especially in the North Austin area, that haven't even taken a hold yet. The big one being Apple building their second campus. Yes, this was announced a year and a half ago, and I think because it's already been a year and a half, people have become immune to this type of announcement, especially with the idea that they're expected to open here in 2022. So that hasn't happened yet. But people just think, oh, it's another tech company coming to Austin. No big deal. This is a huge deal. Most people are so caught up right now in the stock market. Tech has seen a recent sell-off, and people are talking about a tech bubble similar to the early 2000s. When we look at companies like Apple and Amazon and compare it to the early 2000s, where tech companies were very speculative, most of them were not profitable, and companies like Apple and Amazon were drastically different companies compared to what they are. If you take a look at Apple now, they're sitting on so much money in cash, where if there were to happen to be a recession or something like that, it's hard for me to see Apple, a company that's sitting on almost $200 billion, pull the reins on a lot of their activities. Again, just my opinion, but these numbers, I think, speak for itself. And then when we talk about Apple, again, people have heard about this announcement for so long now. We've become immune to what type of growth Apple will bring to North Austin. I want to just bring up a statistic that's a slide that actually comes from a YouTube channel called The Compound. I'll put a link to this in the description. Fantastic YouTube channel. Highly recommend listening to them or listening to their podcast. They posted this yesterday, and this just kind of gives you an idea of how big these companies like Apple have become, which for us, when we deal with billions or $1 trillion market capitalization, we don't understand those numbers because they're so big. It's hard for us to comprehend them. But this does a really good job of it. This is quarterly earnings of the iPad. $7.8 billion came in for the iPad for quarterly revenue. To match that up to Philip Morris, Netflix, McDonald's, Nvidia, Spotify, Twitter, Shopify, Zoom, this dwarfs most of these companies' quarterly revenue. And some of these massive companies that everybody knows, McDonald's and Netflix, one product still beats them out in quarterly revenue. So when we look at an announcement like Apple building their second campus in Northwest Austin and bringing in thousands of employees and expecting to open in 2022, my opinion on this is real estate does not work like a stock. We are not factoring in future revenue or future earnings. And stocks, unlike stocks, we can't just change on a dime like that in 4x or 5x or 10x in value, which, by the way, Apple's stock has practically quadrupled in value over the course of the last year. We haven't seen that with real estate, and I wouldn't expect that to happen in the short term for real estate at any time. But that's because our real estate values basically fluctuate based on demand and supply. And right now, the demand hasn't actually been factored in my opinion, because a lot of these Apple workers have not come here. Yes, we do have thousands right now, I believe close to the Riata location off of Palmer Lane in Northwest Austin. But when this campus gets built out, if more and more Apple employees come here, which based on their announcement, that looks promising, hence why they're building this gigantic campus off of Palmer Lane, I really feel like that type of positive catalyst is not a bubble that's waiting to be burst. This is a massive company, and this is just one company. We haven't talked about Facebook or Amazon or VRBO or Indeed at the domain. I could talk about Texas Children's Hospital, which is breaking ground in middle of May here, and they're doing a ceremony for that. Dell Children's Hospital that's building here. These are hospitals that based on past history, tend to do well, tend to have a steady stream of medical workers coming into the area. These are great signs for North and Northwest Austin, and a big reason why I don't feel like we're in a bubble. Going to the second question, which is how far do I need to go above list to win a property? I would say asking that question in general terms is very dangerous, and I don't recommend it. If you're asking about a specific property and asking for an in-depth analysis about that neighborhood, obviously that's very different, and that's highly recommended. The reason why it's dangerous to ask in general terms is neighborhoods are changing week by week. There might be a property listed at a certain price point, and when that property gets bid up to a certain point and it gets closed and it shows its list price in the MLS, which is our system as realtors that we look at sold prices, the next list price of a similar home might be listed much higher. So you can't just keep going a certain percentage above list. At one point, it becomes unreasonable, and that's where you're starting to see some properties sit on market. Let me give you an example. There was a particular neighborhood I had a buyer interested in Leander, and I won't give exact numbers, but I'll just say that the list price was around $670,000, and based on properties that were pending or under contract at that time, I believe to win, we needed to come in around $830,000. We did that. We won. We were able to take the property off market on a Friday night when that property was listed around Friday afternoon. So we were in at $830,000 in that same neighborhood, the same exact floor plan with lower amounts of upgrades in the home got listed recently at $900,000. I want to review that again. Our property was listed at $670,000. We came in around $830,000 to win. The same floor plan with lower upgrades is listed at $900,000. So that's why I always say you can't just say, oh, well, let's go above 20% above list or 20 or 15% above list. That's not a good question to answer, and it's not a good question to ask. And I don't like answering it because it changes so fast. In one neighborhood, like this one, you have a property that's now $230,000 higher in list price, and that property is now has been sitting on market for a few weeks, and it's because it's priced much higher than what previous properties were priced at. And we're not escalating that fast. Yes, properties are going up, but we're not seeing, a 50% increase in 2 months. So what I would say is take a certain property in a certain area, and what I like to look at is what's under contract in that area. And because I have a network of agents around me that I speak with on a weekly basis, and then on top of that, I'm calling pending and under contract properties, just trying to get like a ballpark feel of what they're under contract on or how competitive it was. That's what's dictating current prices. If you are not keeping up with that type of data of what's currently pending, what's currently under contract, or what's currently off market and what they were sold at, I think those are the numbers we really need to hone in on, because a closed property that went under contract a month and a half ago or 2 months ago or something like that, and sometimes there's a delay with logging that sold price into the MLS. A lot of those properties are out of date. Now that they're 2 months removed from when they were first listed, it's basically a different market 2 months later, if that makes sense. So I like to look at what's under contract and then take it from there. I don't like answering in general terms, how far do I need to go above list? It has to be neighborhood specific. Okay, before we jump into the numbers, I want to make one recommendation, and that's don't be afraid to get into bidding. I find a lot of clients right now who are reaching out to me after suffering in the market, not being able to buy anything over the last 3 to 6 months. They reach out to me and they say, well, I don't want to bid. I don't want to get into the bidding game. And then they say, show me a property that there's no bidding. And what they don't realize is if there's a property that has no bidding, it's priced high. That's why it's not being bid up, right? Anything that's in bidding does start low, but it gets to a certain level. But if you're not in bidding, you might even be paying higher, because that's why they're not bidding. Let me give you an example to make sense of that. I had somebody reach out to me they were under contract on a property in Leander, but their deposit with a builder is very low. So they're thinking about exiting that contract and looking elsewhere. And they bought in, and I'm just going to use ballpark numbers, They bought in around $525,000, and the square footage was fairly low. And when they told me that, honestly, I was thinking, ouch, that's a lot of money for such low square footage. And what I told them is there's a neighboring community that has a higher rated elementary school that has new construction in it. There is bidding, but the bidding is starting at 400. But based on past sales data from about a month ago when they were last bidding, the bidding went only up to 480,000. The square footage was more than what they're currently under contract on. My point in sharing that with you is because they were wanting to avoid bidding that was at 400, they didn't know what it was going bidding up to. They just didn't want to get into bidding. They didn't realize that that bidding was going for 480,000, and they just paid a significantly higher price. They didn't have to bid, but that's because the builder priced it very high. So I would be very careful with that. A lot of people think, oh, bidding means expensive, and then they try to find inventory homes, not realizing that those inventory homes could be priced significantly higher than what properties are actually getting bid up to. Also, don't just focus on avoiding bidding. Focus on avoiding bidding in areas where they're only opening up 1, 2, or 3 homes at a time. That's where I'm seeing the bidding going up to an astronomical amount. Whereas if we focus on areas that have a lot of resales open or available in that neighborhood, and then on top of that, they're releasing 5 or 10 or 15, or sometimes even in certain pockets of Leander or Pflugerville or Georgetown, there are at any given moment 10 or 20 new construction homes available. That's where the bidding is going to be significantly less competitive. Also, look at the restrictions of the builders. Some builders, you can bid on all 3 homes or all 6 homes that are available. So you get somebody who's willing to pay a very high price. They bid on all 5 or all 6, and then they just choose which one they want when they win multiple, right? And then it goes to the next person who did the same thing, and the next person who did the same thing. So you're basically bidding against somebody who's spreading all their bids across everywhere and is willing to pay a high amount. Some builders are limiting buyers to make one bid in one community per week. That's it. Out of 20, 30, 40, 50 homes that are being put up for sale, they're only allowing one bid. And that obviously limits these buyers who are willing to pay an absorbent amount to only making one bid, and that makes it less competitive. And again, that sometimes can keep the price down instead of going up to an astronomical figure. So summary, don't be afraid of bidding. Be open to smart bidding. And that's the best way I could put it, is if you have smart bidding, you have a number you have in mind that you want to keep to, I can tell you, based on past numbers in certain areas, if that's realistic. And sometimes that number is actually going to be less than a property where there is no bidding because it's just priced very high. Hope that makes sense. Before we jump into the numbers, I want to say thank you to Texas National Title. They supply these numbers to me on a monthly basis, and I always appreciate them. Great title company. Looking at the numbers here, it's very simple. Inventory has stayed low here. In March, I don't see a drastic difference happening in April, which should be released in the next week or two. And demand has stayed relatively high. Yes, we saw a huge influx of tech workers when they received notice from their job that they could work from home permanently. That happened back in January, February, and some workers received that sometime in middle to late 2020. But I definitely saw a surge happen in January, February. We are still seeing competitive bids. The only difference, as I said before, is some neighborhoods, the list prices are much higher. So you're not seeing bidding go up 150, 200,000. It might only be 50 or 70,000. But again, that's because some list prices are now $100,000 higher. So just keep that in mind. Don't use that percentage, as I said before, of a certain arbitrary percentage. You just need to go over list. Definitely get comparable properties and get a feel for the inventory. I will say this. This is first off Williamson County, and this is just total listings. There are certain parts of Austin that are starting to see inventory come back. And if properties sit on market, which some are just very high, we could see maybe a little bit more in incentive to buy those properties, maybe money back at closing or something like that. Right now, I'm not seeing anything like that. And the simple reason is we saw a huge increase in lumber prices over the last month. Just to kind of give you a summary of lumber prices, which lumber is the number one price that goes into building a new home. Basically, when we started to see a surge in demand in the summer of 2020, because interest rates dropped and there are a lot of catalysts that really helped with real estate, we saw a surge in demand, and that really didn't help when sawmills were pulling back on how much lumber they were producing. We did see prices come down in the fall, but they went right back up in the winter when we saw another surge in demand. We also saw a lot of sawmills get disrupted by the virus spreading throughout those areas. And we were hoping in February, I remember a lot of people talking about as the rates go down, we hopefully should see sawmills be able to pick up capacity and produce more lumber and prices come down. We've actually recently seen a a huge increase, which it's hard for me to even fathom. This is future lumber futures. It's a little bit different, but should give you a gauge of what's happening. Um, why are lumber prices going up? You can read about it everywhere. It's basically just supply and demand. But I will say is this is a comment from the CEO of KB Homes, which is a massive builder in the United States, and he said the lumber mills are coming back online. I think we're past the worst of it in terms of supply availability. Again, that comment was from last week, so I'm hoping that this is the worst of it, and this spike is the top of lumber prices. That's really what we'll need to see for to have builders open up more inventory. A lot of people keep asking me, well, why can't builders just open up 30, 40, 50 lots? We have nothing but land here in Texas. The simple answer is it's hard for them to lock in prices of your home here thinking that this might be the top for lumber prices and then see this happen, especially when they locked in prices for clients here and then lumber prices went back up, and then they locked in prices for clients here thinking that that's the top, and again it went back up. So a lot of people think builders are making money hand over fist, and I won't I won't pull back from the profits that they're making. They are absolutely making money from the surge of demand that we're seeing in the market. But I will say it's very difficult to lock in prices when the volatility of just lumber is doing this, and the timing of builder materials is changed drastically. I just had a pre-construction meeting yesterday for a client who's just starting to build their home, and the builder is ordering everything that they need for that home now because they don't know when they'll get it. There's no certainty of when they'll get lumber or when they'll get drywall or cabinets or different things like that that used to come in automatically at a certain time. It's just very different, and that's a difficult timetable to try to accomplish for builders when, keep in mind, as they hold onto the property, they're also losing out on money because they have to continue to pay for the property, pay taxes, all that type of stuff. Another example of that is I have a property under contract in Round Rock right now, and that was supposed to close probably back in March or April of this year. We're probably not looking to close on that property now till July or middle of summer for that home. It's just because we've seen delay after delay for different builder materials. And so that's happening across the board. If that changes in the near future, we should hopefully start to see more builders open up more inventory. And that's going to be the deciding factor when we look at the supply. Because demand, as we always say, is much more difficult to put a number to because that's based on phone calls and interest of people. But supply is much more defined. And if we start to see supply go back up, that's when we should see hopefully things calm down where maybe not as much bidding, because that bidding is going to be spread across so many more properties rather than just like 3 to 6 in a neighborhood or 10 to 15. We hopefully should see tens and tens of lots open up and more inventory homes. So that's what I'm hopeful for, and that's an update on the market. If you appreciate this type of analysis, give it one of these. And if you are interested in the real estate market in Austin, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help. Again, my name is Raj Sahu, realtor in Austin, Texas. Take care, everyone.